Today's story is about Calvin Beckmann, a spoiled rich man who chases after a coworker who shows him no interests. But he was determined to get her attention, so he totally changed everything about himself. My question to you, how far are you really willing to go to get the attention of someone you truly like? Let us know in the comments below. Calvin Beckmann leaned against the rooftop bar, whiskey glass in hand, wearing the smug ease of a man who'd never worked for anything he hadn't been handed. Around him, employees from Beckmann Industries laughed too loud and smiled too wide. The usual mix of desperation and ambition you found at the company's annual rooftop party. The skyline behind them glowed with city lights, but Calvin's gaze wasn't on the view. It was locked on Sheila Carmen. She stood near the far railing, a drink in hand, talking to one of the senior engineers. Not laughing, not flirting, just talking. Her posture was straight, her face calm. No fake smiles, no batting lashes. Sheila wasn't like the other women Calvin was used to. She wasn't dressed to impress. She didn't need to be. Her confidence wore better than any designer label. Calvin's grip tightened around his glass. He wasn't used to being ignored. Beside him, Norman Coate caught the direction of his glare and sighed. Norman had the look of a man already tired of the mess he'd soon have to clean up. He clapped a hand on Calvin's shoulder hard enough to make the drink slosh. "Forget it," Norman said under his breath. "Sheila's not the type." Calvin didn't even look at him. "Everyone's a type." "No, not her." Norman dropped his voice even lower. "She's not looking for drama. She's got a kid sister to take care of. She's not impressed by rich boys playing rebel. She's real, Cal. Leave her alone." Calvin smirked and took a slow sip of his whiskey. Norman's warnings always had the opposite effect. Sheila's no-nonsense attitude, the way she didn't even glance his way, it only made her more interesting. More of a challenge. He was used to easy. Used to women who laughed at his bad jokes and hung on his every careless word. Sheila Carmen didn't even know he was breathing the same air. That wouldn't do. Norman groaned as he saw the look flash across Calvin's face. That stubborn, reckless look that usually led to trouble. "Seriously, man, I'm not bailing you out tonight." Calvin just grinned, setting his empty glass down. "Wouldn't dream of it." He adjusted the cuff of his jacket and pushed off the bar, ignoring Norman's muttered curses behind him. The rooftop buzzed around him, but Calvin tuned it all out as he made his way across the crowd. Step by step, cutting through the chatter and laughter, his eyes never leaving Sheila. She didn't see him coming. Good, because Calvin Beckmann didn't know it yet, but Sheila Carmen wasn't just another pretty face at a company party. She was the line he wasn't ready to cross, and the lesson he didn't know he needed. Yet, Calvin approached with that same lazy confidence that usually made women tilt their heads and smile. Sheila didn't even blink. She barely shifted her weight, finishing her drink in one long sip before turning slightly. Catching him in her peripheral vision, he leaned in, flashing that easy grin he used when he wanted something. "You look like you could use some better company." Sheila's eyes slid over him once, sharp, fast, unimpressed. She gave him a look that could have iced a glass of whiskey. "I'm good," she said flatly. Calvin chuckled like she was joking. "Come on, just one drink. What's the worst that could happen?" She crossed her arms, the move deliberate and final. "I waste my time." The words hit harder than he expected. Calvin blinked, thrown off for a half second, the smooth line he had ready dying on his tongue. Around them, the rooftop party blurred into noise. Laughter, clinking glasses, bad music. But Sheila might as well have been standing in the middle of a battlefield, armed and armored. He recovered quickly, trying again. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," she said, voice even but cutting. "Rich kid, daddy's name stitched on your jacket. Trouble looking for a place to land. I've got no time for either." Then she turned her back to him, just like that, dismissing him the way most people would shoo off a mosquito. Calvin stood there, stunned. It wasn't rejection he was used to. It wasn't even anger. It was worse. Pure indifference. Like he didn't even register. Across the rooftop, Norman watched it all unfold and shook his head. He sipped his beer, muttering to himself, "Called it." Calvin watched Sheila walk away without a second glance. His pride itched, but under it, something else burned. Curiosity, irritation, interest. Sheila Carmen wasn't impressed by the Beckmann name, by the suits, the money, the act. She didn't want a man in her life. And for the first time in a long time, Calvin realized he might actually have to become one if he wanted a shot. But tonight wasn't that night. Tonight, Sheila Carmen had already decided, and Calvin Beckmann was not worth her time. The party thinned out as the night wore on, but Calvin stayed. Stubbornness dug in deep, fueled by bruised pride and too many drinks. He spotted Sheila again near the elevators, pulling on a simple black coat, ready to leave. This time, he didn't approach with a line, no smirk, no swagger, just him. "Hey," he said, stepping into her path. Sheila gave him a sideways glance, calm, distant. "Still trying?" Calvin shoved his hands in his pockets, trying for casual. "I'm not as bad as you think." "Maybe," she said, "but you're exactly what I don't need." That landed harder than any insult. Before he could speak, the elevator dinged. Sheila stepped in, the doors sliding shut between them like a verdict. Calvin stood there, staring at his own reflection in the polished doors, feeling for the first time in a long time, completely and deservedly irrelevant. Norman clapped him on the shoulder as he passed by. "Next time?" He said, "Listen." Calvin didn't answer. For once, he didn't have a smart comeback ready. Sheila leaned against the back wall of the elevator, closing her eyes for a brief second as the doors slid shut. The noise from the rooftop faded into silence. She let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Men like Calvin Beckmann were a problem she didn't have time for. Good looks, easy smiles, expensive problems wrapped up in privilege and charm. She'd met his type before. They came on strong, chased harder when told no, and disappeared. The second life got real. She had no use for boys pretending to be men. Not when she had rent to pay, a teenage sister counting on her, and a future she was building with her own hands. No shortcuts, no safety nets. Still, a small part of her, the part buried under years of caution, noticed the way Calvin looked after she shut him down. It wasn't anger. It wasn't arrogance. It was something closer to lost. She shook the thought away. Not her problem. The elevator dinged on the ground floor. Sheila squared her shoulders, stepped out into the cold night, and didn't look back. Sheila kicked off her shoes the second she stepped into the apartment, letting the door swing shut behind her with a heavy thud. The place was small, 2 bedrooms crammed into a building that always smelled like damp concrete. But it was theirs. Paid for with long hours and tight budgets. "Mia?" Sheila called, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter. "In here." Her sister's voice floated from the shared living room. Sheila rounded the corner and stopped. Mia sat on the couch, her laptop open in front of her, bouncing in place like she was about to explode. "What's going on?" Sheila asked, warily. Mia grinned so wide it looked like her face might split. "I got in." Sheila blinked. "Into what?" "The STEM Advanced program." Mia shoved the laptop toward her, the screen displaying an official email header with the words "Congratulations" in bold at the top. "Miss Ramirez nominated me last semester, remember? They only take, like, 20 kids in the whole city. Full mentorship, college prep, everything." Sheila stared at the screen for a second too long. She wasn't used to good news landing in their lap without a fight. "Are you serious?" she said, voice low. Mia nodded, her excitement barely contained. This could mean real scholarship money, Sheila, like actual full rides. Engineering schools, big ones. Sheila lowered herself onto the couch, her mind already spinning. Tuition, housing, books. Even with scholarships, college was expensive. Crushingly expensive. But programs like this opened doors Mia couldn't even knock on before. Sheila looked at her little sister, 14, all elbows and ambition, smarter than half the adults Sheila worked with every day, and felt something rare bubble up in her chest. "Hope. You worked hard for this," Sheila said, reaching over to pull Mia into a quick hug. "You earned this." Mia squeezed her tight. "I'm gonna do it, Sheila. I'm gonna get out of here. Get us both out of here." Sheila pulled back, looking her sister in the eye. "Listen to me. You're not doing this for me. You're doing it for you. Don't carry me on your back. I can handle myself." Mia rolled her eyes. "Yeah, but still." "No," Sheila said, her voice steady. "You get out. You build the life you want. You don't look back unless it's because you're proud." Mia nodded, serious now, her hands clenched into determined fists. Sheila ruffled her hair, something she hadn't done in years, and smiled for real this time. Not polite, not forced. Genuine. This was why she kept her walls up, why she couldn't afford to waste time on people like Calvin Beckmann. Her life wasn't a game. Her future, Mia's future, depended on every choice she made. There was no room for distractions, only the climb forward. Sheila ruffled Mia's hair, smiling for real. Not polite, not forced, genuine. This was why she kept her walls up, why she couldn't afford to waste time on people like Calvin Beckmann. Her life wasn't a game. Her future, Mia's future, depended on every choice she made. There was no room for distractions, only the climb forward. Mia grinned up at her, mischief flickering in her eyes. "You know," she said, "now that I'm getting my life together, maybe you should think about yours." Sheila raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I mean, like?" Mia wiggled her eyebrows. "A boyfriend, maybe, someday?" Sheila snorted. "I don't have time to babysit a grown man." "Not all guys are disasters," Mia said, laughing. "Just most of them. Exactly my point." Sheila leaned back against the couch, arms crossed. "Besides, the only men I meet are either my boss's idiot son, or guys who think STEM is a gym." Mia giggled, pulling a throw pillow into her lap. "You're gonna be that cool, scary aunt someday." Sheila shrugged, unbothered. "Better that than someone who built her life around a man who couldn't even build himself." Mia nodded, but the teasing spark stayed in her eyes. "Still, it wouldn't kill you to have some fun once in a while." Sheila smirked. "My idea of fun is getting you into college with zero debt." Mia threw the pillow at her. Sheila caught it easily, tossing it back without missing a beat. For a few minutes, the world outside didn't exist. Not the bills, not the risks, or the pressure sitting heavy on Sheila's shoulders. Just the two of them, laughing like normal sisters, daring to imagine a future that might finally belong to them. The next morning, Sheila was barely through the front doors of Beckmann Industries when the receptionist called out to her. "Miss Carmen, these came for you." Sheila paused, raising an eyebrow. A large bouquet of fresh flowers sat on the desk. Bright, expensive, way too much for an ordinary Thursday. No card, no signature. A few nearby coworkers turned to look, whispering. Sheila felt the weight of their stares, but her face stayed blank. Calm, professional. "Thanks," she said, taking the bouquet with both hands. The smell was rich and sweet, already too much. Sheila walked straight past her desk, past the curious glances, and into the break room. She spotted an empty spot on the counter, right next to the coffee machine. Perfect. She set the flowers down, grabbed a mug from the cabinet, and went about making her coffee like nothing was out of the ordinary. By lunch, half the office had commented on how beautiful they were, how generous it was of Sheila to share. A few tried guessing who the sender was, but Sheila didn't answer. She just smiled, that tight, polite smile she had perfected over the years, and changed the subject every time. From across the office floor, Calvin watched it all unfold, leaning against a wall with a coffee in hand. He hadn't expected that. Most women he knew would have lit up at the attention, posting pictures, showing off to their friends, coming to find him with a soft look and a thank you ready on their lips. Not Sheila. She didn't even acknowledge him. She took the grand gesture, stripped it of its power, and made it about everyone else. And somehow, instead of feeling embarrassed or pissed off, Calvin felt something else settle in his chest. Respect. Real, unfamiliar respect. Norman strolled past him, catching the direction of his stare. He didn't even slow down, just muttered under his breath, "You're playing a whole different game now, buddy." Calvin didn't answer. He just kept watching as Sheila walked back to her desk, steady, self-assured, unbothered. Like a woman who knew exactly who she was, with or without flowers, with or without anyone's attention. For the first time in a long time, Calvin realized, if he wanted any chance with someone like Sheila Carmen, it wasn't about impressing her. It was about being better. Actually better. And that scared him more than he cared to admit. The next day, the office buzzed with an unusual energy. A massive spread of breakfast pastries covered the break room counters. Croissants, danishes, muffins stacked on silver trays like something out of a luxury hotel brunch. A handwritten sign sat next to them. "Enjoy, Calvin B." Employees circled like bees, laughing and grabbing whatever they could fit on their plates. Calvin leaned casually against the doorway, soaking it in. For once, he figured he was doing something right, not just for Sheila, but for everyone. Except Sheila didn't even glance at the table. She walked straight past the crowd with her usual no-nonsense stride, coffee in hand, focus locked on her day like nothing had changed. Calvin frowned, pushing off the wall. He weaved through the chatter and caught up to her near her desk. "Hey," he said, trying for casual. "You didn't get anything." Sheila looked up from her laptop, her expression flat. "I'm good." "You sure? There's like a whole bakery back there." She set her coffee down and leaned back in her chair, studying him. Not cruelly, but like a teacher waiting for a student to figure out why he failed the test. "If you're trying to impress me," she said evenly, "you picked the wrong bakery." Calvin blinked. "What?" She crossed one leg over the other, calm and deliberate. "You ordered from some upscale place downtown where a single croissant costs half my grocery budget. If you really wanted to do something meaningful, you'd have picked a spot in the neighborhood. Somewhere that could actually use the business." Calvin opened his mouth, then closed it. She wasn't finished. "And next time," Sheila added, her tone sharp, but not cruel, "maybe don't just stand there with your hands in your pockets like you're waiting for applause. You want me to take notice? Roll up your sleeves? Help set up, pass out plates, clean up afterward. Be part of it." She picked up her coffee again, cool and unbothered. Actions, not credit. For a second, Calvin just stood there, feeling every inch of the lesson settle into him. No anger, no insults, just facts. He gave a short laugh, not mocking, but almost impressed, and ran a hand through his hair. "You don't make this easy, do you?" Sheila's mouth twitched, almost like she might smile. "Almost. Life's not easy," she said, eyes back on her laptop. "You figure that out, you might actually surprise me." And just like that, the conversation was over. Calvin turned away, hands jammed in his pockets. This time he knew he had work to do, and not the kind that came with silver trays and easy applause. The kind that actually meant something. Calvin barely had time to settle into his office when the call came through. His father's assistant, clipped and professional as always. "Mr. Beckmann wants to see you, right now." Calvin sighed, straightened his jacket, and made the long walk down the executive hallway. Garrett Beckmann's office loomed at the end, all glass walls and cold steel furniture, a constant reminder of who really built Beckmann Industries. When Calvin stepped inside, Garrett didn't bother looking up from his laptop. "Sit," he said. Calvin dropped into the chair across from the massive desk, trying to hide his irritation. "What's this about?" Garrett finally closed the laptop, folding his hands together. His stare was sharp and unforgiving. "I hear you've been chasing after Sheila Carmen." Calvin's jaw tightened. "I wouldn't call it chasing." Garrett leaned back, unimpressed. "Call it whatever you want. I'm telling you to stop." Calvin stiffened. "Why?" "Because she's the best damn IT lead this company has," Garrett said bluntly. "She's overseeing a project worth more money than you've probably spent in your entire life. She's up for a promotion that's long overdue. And if you distract her, or worse, make her uncomfortable enough to walk out that door, I will hold you personally responsible." Calvin opened his mouth to argue, but Garrett cut him off with a hard laugh. "Son," he said, shaking his head, "Sheila knows her value, and right now, you're not part of it." Calvin felt heat rising to his face. "I have everything to offer her." Garrett's smile was cold. "Really? What exactly do you bring to the table besides my last name and a habit of burning through trust funds like gasoline?" Calvin sat back, swallowing his pride, but the words still pushed out. "I'm not useless." "Prove it," Garrett snapped. "You want to impress her? Hell, you want to impress me? Get off your ass. Get involved. Actually help this company instead of chasing women and wasting what's been handed to you." The room fell into a heavy silence. "You think Sheila's impressed by grand gestures and empty words?" Garrett said, voice dropping low. "She built herself from nothing. Every step she took, she earned. She doesn't need saving, and she sure as hell doesn't need a distraction." Calvin stared at the floor, fists clenched on his knees. "Grow up, Calvin," Garrett said, voice final, "or stay out of her way." Calvin rose slowly, every inch of him burning with anger and shame he didn't want to admit he felt. Without another word, he left the office, the door clicking shut behind him. For the first time in his life, Calvin Beckmann realized charm wasn't going to save him. If he wanted anything real with Sheila, with his company, with himself, he was going to have to earn it. And that scared him even more than his father's anger. Calvin found Norman in the small corner office he called his own, buried under a stack of paperwork, coffee in hand, eyes already tired, and it wasn't even noon. You look like hell, Norman said without looking up. Thanks, Calvin muttered, stepping inside. I need your advice. That made Norman pause. He leaned back in his chair, studying Calvin like he wasn't sure if this was a joke. You serious? Calvin nodded. Dead serious. Norman set his coffee down. All right, you want my advice? Start by actually knowing the woman you're chasing. Calvin frowned. I know Sheila. No, you know about her, Norman said, sharp. You know she's smart, she's tough, she's not impressed by your money. But do you know what she needs? What matters to her? What keeps her up at night? Calvin stayed quiet. Listen, Norman continued, his tone softening a little. I hear her sister, Mia, got into one of those top STEM programs. Big deal. Lot of smart kids in that program, but not a lot of resources. Most of them are one car repair or hospital bill away from losing their shot. He leaned forward, voice low. You really want to get Sheila's attention? Stop thinking about grand gestures for her. Start helping what she cares about. Calvin nodded slowly, gears turning in his head. You're Beckmann, Norman said. You've got pull. Use it right for once. Find a way to help those kids, and not by slapping your name on a giant check and calling it a day. The words hit harder than anything Calvin's father said. By the time he left Norman's office, an idea had already started forming. 2 days later, Calvin sat in the conference room with the HR director, a few project managers, and even someone from PR. His proposal sat in front of them, a 4-week paid internship program for high school STEM students during the summer semester. Real work experience, real pay, real mentorship. Not a PR stunt, an actual opportunity. And tucked into the long-term plans, another idea. The start of a Beckmann Foundation scholarship fund, aimed specifically at supporting students from underrepresented neighborhoods trying to break into tech, engineering, and science fields. Wasn't flashy. It wasn't something he could wave in Sheila's face and expect instant praise. But that wasn't the point anymore. For the first time, Calvin wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about the people Sheila cared about, and what he could build, not just what he could buy. And if Sheila noticed eventually, good. But if not, at least this time, Calvin Beckmann was finally doing something that mattered. Sheila was halfway through debugging a stubborn piece of code when she caught pieces of conversation drifting from the break room. Did you hear about the new internship program? Yeah, Beckmann Industries is launching it this summer. Paid internships for STEM high schoolers. Crazy, right? Full mentorship, real work, not just coffee runs. Sheila's fingers froze on the keyboard. She sat back slowly, listening without looking like she was listening. Word is, another voice chimed in. It was Calvin Beckmann's idea. A pause, then a laugh. No, wear it, maybe. Calvin, the guy barely knows what a spreadsheet is. Sheila shook her head, turning back to her screen. She forced herself to refocus, but the words stuck. Paid internships, high school STEM students, summer semester. Exactly the kind of opportunity Mia and kids like her desperately needed. Coincidence? Sheila doubted it. She pulled up the company's internal announcements and, sure enough, found a formal memo. Beckmann Industries Summer STEM Internship Program. 4 weeks, paid stipends, mentorship opportunities, applications opening next month. Priority given to students in city-funded STEM initiatives. The memo was signed by the CEO's office. But tucked in the bottom corner, in small print, was a note. Program initiated by Calvin Beckmann. Sheila stared at the screen, tapping her pen lightly against her notebook. It didn't make sense. This wasn't some showy stunt. It wasn't flowers. It wasn't pastries from overpriced bakeries. This was real work. Real effort. Something that would take months of planning and, more importantly, real investment from the company. She sat back in her chair, arms crossed. For the first time since Calvin started his ridiculous pursuit, Sheila wasn't annoyed. She was curious. She wasn't ready to hand him a gold star, not even close. One program didn't erase years of reckless privilege and easy living, but she couldn't ignore the shift either. Maybe, just maybe, Calvin Beckmann was starting to figure out that life wasn't about looking good. It was about doing good, and that, Sheila thought, narrowing her eyes thoughtfully at the announcement on her screen, was worth paying attention to. Maybe not today, maybe not even tomorrow, but eventually, maybe. Later that night, Sheila sat across from Mia at their cramped kitchen table, both of them picking at a lazy dinner of takeout noodles. Mia, Sheila said casually, swirling her fork. Something came up at work today you might want to hear. Mia looked up, curious. Sheila slid her laptop across the table. The announcement for the Beckmann Industries Summer STEM internship program pulled up. Mia's eyes widened as she read. Paid internships? 4 weeks? Real projects? Sheila nodded. Priority given to students in your program. Mia practically vibrated with excitement. This could change everything. Real work experience before college? I'd be way ahead of the curve. Sheila smiled, proud but cautious. Applications open next month. You're applying. No arguments. Mia bounced in her seat. Obviously. Who set this up? I mean, usually companies don't care unless it's a tax write-off. Sheila hesitated for a second, then said, Calvin Beckmann started it. Mia's mouth dropped open. Wait, the Calvin? Mr. Looks like he was born for every woman? Sheila laughed under her breath. The very one. Mia grinned, teasing. Guess chasing after you made him grow a brain. Sheila rolled her eyes, but she couldn't ignore the flicker of something new. Something almost resembling respect, forming deep in her gut. Maybe Calvin Beckmann wasn't completely hopeless after all. The next morning, Sheila was coming out of a meeting when she spotted Calvin down the hall, talking with a few managers. He wasn't leaning against the wall this time, hands in his pockets, waiting for someone else to do the work. He was engaged, focused, listening more than talking. Sheila almost kept walking. Almost. Instead, she paused, pretending to check her phone until he noticed her. His face lit up slightly, but he didn't rush over. No flashy grin, no cocky swagger. Good. She let him approach her, slowly, cautiously, like he knew he was on thin ice. Morning, Calvin said. Morning, Sheila answered smoothly. There was a beat of silence. Then, deliberately, Sheila said, I heard about the internship program. Calvin shrugged like it was no big deal, but there was tension in his shoulders, just trying to do something that actually matters. Sheila studied him carefully. Testing. You'll be involved, right? She asked, voice neutral. Calvin straightened. Every step. Interviews, training, mentoring. I'm not just slapping my name on it. She nodded once, filing away the answer. And the Scholarship Foundation? She asked, one eyebrow raised. Working with legal and PR now, Calvin said. Might take longer, but it's happening. Sheila let the silence stretch just a second too long, enough for him to sweat, before giving the smallest, faintest smile. Good, she said. Calvin's mouth twitched like he wanted to smile back, but he didn't push it. He just nodded respectfully and stepped aside, letting her pass without another word. As Sheila walked away, she allowed herself the smallest flicker of approval. Maybe, just maybe, Calvin Beckmann was learning. And if he was serious, if he kept showing up, kept building, kept working, maybe one day she'd take a real look at him. But not yet. He still had a lot to prove. That evening, Sheila was finishing up some paperwork at the kitchen table when Mia wandered in, a snack bag in hand, already grinning like she was planning trouble. So, Mia said casually, popping a chip into her mouth, anything interesting happen at work today? Sheila didn't even look up. No. Mia flopped into the chair across from her, kicking her legs up onto another. Really? Because I heard a rumor. Sheila sighed, setting down her pen. You and your rumors. This one's legit. Mia leaned in, all fake innocence. Something about a certain Beckmann standing tall, not making an idiot out of himself, and actually doing real work for once. Sheila gave her a flat look. Congratulations, he discovered responsibility. Should we throw him a parade? Mia snorted. You're impossible. Not impossible, Sheila said, smirking slightly. Selective. Uh-huh. Mia crunched another chip, grinning wider. Selective about guys who are finally acting like grown-ups, you mean? Sheila shook her head, but inside, the words stuck harder than she wanted to admit. It had been different today. Calvin hadn't flirted. He hadn't bragged. He hadn't even tried to score points. He just showed up, steady, present, serious, like a man who knew the weight of what he was trying to do. It shouldn't matter. It couldn't matter. And yet, Mia watched her, sensing the shift, even if Sheila wasn't ready to admit it. You know, she said lightly, sometimes people actually change. Sheila gave her a long, measured look, and sometimes they just get better at pretending. True, Mia agreed, but not everybody goes that far just to fake it. Sheila opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, because deep down, part of her knew Mia was right, and that scared her more than anything. The following day, boardroom was full when Sheila walked in, laptop tucked under one arm, a folder of notes in the other. Executives lined both sides of the long polished table. Sharp suits, sharper eyes, but Sheila didn't blink. She plugged in, pulled up her presentation, and got to work. For 40 minutes, she outlined her team's progress on the cybersecurity upgrade project. New infrastructure designs, risk assessments, projected cost savings. She answered every question without hesitation, keeping her voice calm, confident, and clear. By the time she wrapped up, the board members were nodding, murmuring to each other in approval. Beckmann, seated at the head of the table, closed his folder and leaned back, studying her like a man evaluating an investment he knew was about to pay off. "Outstanding work, Miss Carmen," he said finally, breaking the silence. "You've exceeded every benchmark we set, and a few we didn't even think to ask for." Sheila inclined her head slightly. "Thank you, sir." Garrett smiled, a rare, almost genuine thing. "Which is why I'm offering you a promotion, Director of IT Infrastructure. Full benefits, full decision-making authority, and a significant salary increase." Sheila's heart hammered once against her ribs, but her face stayed neutral. "Thank you," she said again, this time with real weight behind it. Garrett tapped a pen lightly against the table, voice dropping to something more personal. "I'd also like you to take a hand in shaping the STEM internship program your colleague initiated." Sheila caught the slight pause. "Calvin's made a good start," Garrett continued, "but he'll need someone who knows how to turn an idea into something sustainable." Sheila folded her hands neatly on the table. "You want me to oversee it? I want you to help it become more than a gesture," Garrett said. He glanced at her, a small gleam in his sharp blue eyes. "And if we're being honest, I know why Calvin started it." He let the words hang there a beat longer than necessary. "He's trying to impress you." Sheila didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Garrett's mouth quirked into something not quite a smile. "Whether you ever return his interest or not, Miss Carmen, that's your business. I won't interfere." His gaze hardened slightly. "But if your influence helps turn him into a man worth respecting, not just for your sake but for this company's, then I consider that an additional benefit." Sheila nodded once, sharp and professional. "Understood." Garrett leaned back, satisfied. "Good. HR will send over the formal offer by end of day. You've earned it." As the board members started gathering their papers and filtering out of the room, Sheila packed up her laptop slowly, deliberately. She wasn't foolish enough to believe Calvin was changing for her. If he wanted to be better, it had to be because he chose to be better. Still, a small part of her, the part she usually kept buried under long hours and high walls, wondered what might happen if he actually pulled it off. Not for her. Not even for his father. But for himself. Sheila and Mia stepped out of the small Italian restaurant into the warm evening air, both carrying takeout boxes and laughing harder than they had in weeks. "Okay, seriously," Mia said between giggles. "You ordering 3 desserts is why you're my hero." "Celebrating properly," Sheila said, nudging her. "Promotion like this doesn't happen every day." "You're a boss now," Mia teased, tossing an arm around her sister's shoulders. "Director Carmen. It even sounds powerful." Sheila rolled her eyes, but she couldn't wipe the smile off her face. They turned the corner. Heading toward the coffee shop, Mia begged to stop at for a victory latte when Sheila spotted him. Calvin Beckmann. He was sitting at an outside table, a coffee in one hand, a thick folder in the other, looking unusually focused. No friends around, no chaos, just him and a stack of paperwork. Mia spotted him at the same moment and immediately lit up. "Hey, Calvin," she called before Sheila could stop her. Calvin looked up, surprised, then smiled. Not that cocky, polished grin Sheila was used to, but something a little nervous, a little real. He stood as they approached. "Hi," he said, a little unsure. His eyes flicked to Sheila, searching her face for some kind of permission. Before she could say anything, Mia beamed. "We're celebrating Sheila's promotion. You should join us." Sheila shot Mia a look, a sharp one, but her sister just grinned wider and dragged over an empty chair from a nearby table. Calvin hesitated only a second before sitting down. The conversation started a little awkwardly, but Mia, ever the natural bridge between people, smoothed it over fast. "So," Mia said, sipping her latte, "what's in the folder? Something top secret?" Calvin chuckled. "Just the internship program details. trying to finalize the mentor list before HR tears it apart. Mia's eyes lit up. You're seriously hands-on with it? Trying to be, Calvin said, rubbing the back of his neck. I want it to be more than just a summer job for these kids. Real mentorship, real connections, maybe even a path to full-time jobs down the line. Sheila listened quietly, observing him. The way he spoke wasn't rehearsed, wasn't for show. He was serious and passionate, and maybe most important, humble. Mia asked a dozen rapid-fire questions about the program, peppering Calvin with ideas, suggestions, even volunteering to accidentally leak it to her school group chat once applications opened. Calvin laughed along, taking notes on his phone without brushing her off once. And somewhere between the jokes and the ideas and the easy conversation, Sheila felt something shift. This wasn't the Calvin Beckmann she rolled her eyes at. This was someone trying. Really trying. Not for her. For something bigger than himself. As they wrapped up and said goodnight, Mia bounced ahead toward the car, chattering about everything she was going to tell her friends. Sheila hung back a step, looking over at Calvin. Good work, she said quietly. Calvin met her eyes. Serious for once. Thanks. Means a lot coming from you. For the first time, Sheila didn't look away. She just nodded. Maybe, just maybe, Calvin Beckmann wasn't chasing her anymore. Maybe he was chasing something real, and maybe she could finally respect that. Sheila officially joined the internship project team the following week. Garrett's approval had come through fast, almost suspiciously fast, but Sheila didn't waste time wondering about the politics behind it. She had work to do, and she was determined to keep it professional. Calvin was already in the conference room when she arrived for their first real working session, sleeves rolled up, whiteboard covered in notes and rough sketches. He didn't see her right away. He was too busy cross-referencing timelines on his laptop and muttering under his breath about scheduling conflicts. Sheila allowed herself a small private smile. He was actually working, not just showing up. Not just talking, working. She slid into a chair quietly, opening her notebook. Calvin looked up, surprised and maybe a little relieved. Hey, he said. Glad you're here. I, could use a second brain on this. Sheila raised an eyebrow. Only a second? Calvin grinned, but it was self-deprecating this time, not smug. Fine, first brain. Sheila stood and moved to the whiteboard, scanning his rough structure. Some of it was solid, some of it needed serious refinement. She pointed to a cluster of overlapping timelines. If you want the mentors actually available for the students, you need to stagger onboarding, she said. Otherwise, half the interns are going to end up shadowing empty cubicles. Calvin nodded immediately, already pulling out his marker. Good call. He erased and rewrote sections without a hint of argument or bruised ego. And that surprised Sheila more than anything. Over the next 2 hours, they worked side by side, bouncing ideas, sketching solutions, fine-tuning everything from intern projects to supervisor expectations. Calvin didn't just listen. He absorbed, asked smart questions, offered tweaks that sometimes made her stop and rethink her own plans. By the time they broke for a late lunch, the rough chaos of the project had been carved into a real, actionable plan. And Sheila had to admit, Calvin Beckmann was pulling his weight. Maybe even more than that. Later that night, as she stayed late finalizing documentation, Sheila glanced across the office and spotted him again, still there, still working. No audience, no crowd, just Calvin, sleeves pushed up, rubbing his temples, scribbling notes and edits under the brutal glow of his laptop. He wasn't doing this for show. He wasn't doing it for praise. He was doing it because it mattered now. And against every wall she'd built, every warning she'd given herself, Sheila felt something shift deeper. Not attraction, not even admiration, respect, the real kind. The kind that was earned inch by inch, not bought. She shook her head, focusing back on her screen. One day at a time, she reminded herself. And maybe, if he kept proving it, she'd start believing that Calvin Beckmann could become a man worth standing beside. The launch day arrived fast. The office buzzed with energy. Posters went up, HR reps circled with clipboards, and local news outlets camera crew to capture the start of Beckmann Industries' new STEM internship program. Sheila stood near the back of the main conference hall, arms crossed, watching as students and mentors trickled in, bright-eyed and excited. At the front, Calvin was talking with the HR director, a few board members and Garrett himself, looking crisp and professional in a simple dark blazer. No flashy moves, no cocky smiles, just solid, real. Sheila allowed herself a small breath of pride, not for him exactly, but for what they had built together. The interns filed into rows of seats, and Garrett stepped up to the podium to give the opening remarks. After a few minutes, he handed the mic to Calvin. It was Calvin's turn. He cleared his throat, a little stiff at first, but then something clicked. His voice evened out. His posture straightened. "This program isn't just about giving students a job for the summer," Calvin said. "It's about building pathways. Real ones. It's about opening doors that should have been open all along." He paused, letting the words land. "It's about making sure that talent, not privilege, is what shapes the future." Sheila felt something catch in her chest. He meant it. The speech wrapped with polite applause, and the interns were ushered toward breakout sessions. Sheila was gathering her notes when she heard a voice she hadn't expected. "Calvin, darling, that was amazing." Sheila turned just in time to see a tall blonde in designer heels, someone who looked like she belonged at a yacht party, not a tech event, weaving through the crowd toward him. Sheila recognized her vaguely, one of Calvin's old flames. Loud, flirty, trouble. The woman latched onto Calvin's arm, flashing a dazzling smile. "You should let me take you out tonight to celebrate. Just you, me, and a few bottles of champagne." Sheila watched, waiting for the inevitable, the lazy grin, the smooth acceptance. But Calvin didn't so much as flinch. He gently detached the woman's hand from his sleeve, polite but firm. "Thanks, but no." The woman blinked, confused. "Oh, come on, Calvin. You're a hero now. You should be." He cut her off, glancing over his shoulder and locking eyes with Sheila. "If you want to congratulate someone," Calvin said, voice steady, "talk to Sheila Carmen." He nodded toward Sheila, his voice loud enough for a few others nearby to hear. "She's the one behind our success. None of this could have happened without her." Sheila froze for half a second, caught completely off guard. The woman huffed something under her breath and disappeared into the crowd, clearly not used to being turned down. Calvin made his way over to Sheila, hands tucked loosely into his pockets. No swagger, no act. Just real, genuine respect in his eyes. "You okay with me giving credit where it's due?" he asked, almost teasing, but also serious underneath. Sheila tilted her head, studying him. "More than okay," she said. For a brief moment, the noise of the room seemed to fade. Just the two of them standing there, two people who had fought for something real, and maybe, just maybe, were starting to see each other differently too. Partners. Not in some fairy tale. Not in some messy office fling. Real partners. Sheila allowed herself a small, rare smile. And this time, it wasn't guarded at all. The months rolled by quietly, the way real change always did. Without grand announcements. Without flashy gestures. Sheila and Calvin spent long hours working side by side, first on the internship program's summer launch, then on expanding it into something permanent. A foundation, a legacy. Somewhere along the way, the sharp edges between them smoothed out. The banter remained, but it lost its bite. The conversations got longer, realer. The trust built itself brick by brick, word by word, late night after late night. Sheila noticed the changes first in small ways. Calvin stopped chasing after office attention like it was owed to him. He listened, genuinely listened, when students spoke during workshops, when mentors suggested improvements, when colleagues flagged concerns. He didn't dodge the hard conversations anymore. He leaned in, took notes, asked smart questions. When someone needed help setting up a STEM event on a Saturday morning, Calvin didn't send an assistant. He showed up himself, sleeves rolled up, carrying tables and running extension cords without complaint. The old Calvin, the one who'd chased after validation like a spoiled child, seemed further and further away with each passing day. He still attended company events when required, but the late-night rooftop parties, the endless bar crawls, the meaningless noise, gone, replaced by something real. Sheila saw it most clearly in how he treated women now. No more flirtations, no more lazy, self-assured charm. When he talked to women, students, colleagues, board members, it was with focus and respect. No undertones. No performance. He wasn't performing at all anymore. He was just himself. One afternoon, as they wrapped up a mentor evaluation meeting, Sheila found herself lingering in the conference room, tapping her pen against her notebook. Calvin glanced over, noticing. "You good? You good?" he asked, voice easy but concerned. She looked at him, really looked at him. The man standing in front of her wasn't the reckless heir who thought flowers and pastries could fix anything. He was someone who understood weight, responsibility, impact, someone she could trust, someone she could respect. Sheila offered a rare, real smile. "Yeah," she said. "I'm good." Calvin smiled back, not with smugness, but with quiet pride, like he was finally starting to realize who he was and liking the man he was becoming. And for the first time since he'd first stormed into her life, Sheila let herself wonder, just a little, if maybe someday there could be something more between them. But not because she needed saving, and not because he needed winning, because maybe, just maybe, they'd finally earned the right to stand on even ground. Together. The acceptance email came late on a Friday night. Mia burst into the living room, waving her phone in the air like a trophy. Her face lit up with a grin so wide, Sheila thought her cheeks might split. "I got in," she shrieked. "Full ride. Dream school." They even mentioned the internship program in the scholarship letter. Sheila dropped the stack of bills she'd been sorting, rushing to grab her sister in a tight, laughing hug. For a long moment they just stood there, rocking side to side, dancing, both of them overwhelmed with the same rare, fierce feeling, victory. When Mia finally pulled back, breathless and glowing, she said, "We have to celebrate, like really celebrate." Sheila laughed. "What do you have in mind?" Mia grinned slyly. "Can we invite Calvin too?" Sheila froze for half a second, not because she didn't want to, but because it surprised her how natural it felt to include him now. Not as a show, not as a favor, as someone who mattered. Sheila gave a small nod. Yeah, we can." They ended up at a small, cozy restaurant near the waterfront. Nothing fancy, just good food, warm lights, and a corner booth where they could actually hear each other talk. Mia couldn't stop bouncing in her seat, firing off college plans, internship dreams, and future goals faster than anyone could keep up. Calvin listened intently the whole time, smiling, laughing, asking real questions like he was genuinely invested. Because he was. When the check came, Calvin didn't even flinch, just casually slid his card onto the table without a word. No grand gesture, no need for attention, just quiet support. Afterward, they stepped out into the crisp night air. Mia ran ahead toward the car, still riding her high. Sheila hung back with Calvin under the streetlight. For a moment, neither of them said anything, just the sounds of the city around them, cars, music, laughter from nearby patios. Then Sheila, feeling a little brave, a little reckless, said casually, "You know, if you're free sometime, we could grab coffee." Calvin blinked, caught off guard. "Coffee?" he repeated, like he was making sure he heard right. Sheila smiled, small, real, a little shy but steady. "As friends." There was a long beat where she could see the gears turning in his head. The old Calvin would have jumped at it, made a joke, pushed too hard. But this Calvin, he just smiled back, steady and genuine. "I'd like that," he said. And just like that, something shifted again, quiet but strong. Not a beginning built on fireworks or grand promises. Just two people, starting over the right way, as equals, as friends. Maybe someday, as something more. The next morning, Calvin found Norman in his usual spot, slouched behind his desk, sipping bad coffee like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Without even looking up, Norman grunted, "You're grinning like an idiot? What happened? Someone hand you a trophy for showing up?" Calvin dropped into the chair across from him, still wearing the same stupid grin. "Sheila asked me to coffee," he said like he still couldn't believe it himself. That got Norman's attention. He set his mug down carefully, eyeing Calvin like he might have grown a second head. "Coffee?" Norman repeated slowly. "Like, actual coffee?" "Yeah," Calvin said, leaning back, hands behind his head, looking far too pleased with himself. "As friends," Norman snorted. "You say that like it's a bad thing?" Calvin shrugged. "I'll take what I can get." Norman shook his head, a slow, dry smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. "You know what that is, right?" "What?" "Progress," Norman said. "Actual, grown man progress." Calvin chuckled. Norman leaned forward, fixing him with a look that was half warning, half something close to pride. "Now listen to me, Beckmann. And listen good. You screw this up, you don't just lose her. You lose every ounce of respect you finally earned." Calvin's grin faded a little, replaced by something steadier. He nodded. "I know." Norman studied him for another beat, then gave a small, satisfied nod. "Good," he said. Because I'm too damn old to watch you fall on your face again. Calvin laughed under his breath, but deep down, he felt it, the weight of it. This wasn't a game anymore. This was real. And for once, he was ready. The coffee shop Sheila picked was small, tucked between a laundromat and a bookstore, far from the trendy spots Calvin used to haunt. No neon signs, no curated playlists, just the smell of strong coffee, the hum of quiet conversation, and the occasional clatter of dishes behind the counter. Calvin arrived early. That alone said something. He sat at a corner table, hands wrapped around a plain black mug, tapping one foot nervously under the table. When Sheila walked in, she spotted him immediately. No suit today, just a simple button-up, sleeves rolled, no tie. Still a little polished, but human. She made her way over, sliding into the seat across from him without ceremony. "Hey," she said, setting down her bag. "Hey," Calvin echoed, offering a small, real smile. They ordered, nothing complicated, no triple-shot caramel swirl disasters, and settled into an easy, if slightly awkward silence. It was Sheila who broke it. "You're not what I expected," she said simply. Calvin raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, keeping it casual, I am trying to be different from the old me. I was over the top." She smirked a little. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah, I wasn't too proud of the guy you met back then either." Sheila wrapped her hands around her cup, studying him. "You could have stayed that guy. No one expected you to change." "Except you," he said quietly. Sheila shrugged. "I didn't expect it. I just didn't excuse it." Calvin sat back, smiling a little more at that. There. They talked for a while. Not about work, not about the internship program, but about real things. Sheila told him about her dreams for Mia, about how scared and proud she was watching her little sister chase a future they'd barely dared to imagine. Calvin opened up about his own fears, how for the first time in his life, he actually wanted to be responsible for something bigger than himself, and how terrifying that was. There was no flirting, no performance, just two people, sitting across from each other, finally being seen. At one point, when Mia's name came up again, Calvin smiled and said, "You know she's going to change the world, right?" Sheila smiled, soft but fierce. "That's the plan." And for a moment, Calvin didn't say anything. He just looked at her. Not like she was a challenge to conquer. Not like she was some unattainable prize, but like she was exactly what she was, a woman who had fought for everything she had, and won. As they finished their coffee and stepped outside into the cool afternoon air, Sheila turned to him, hands in her jacket pockets. "This was nice," she said. Calvin smiled, easy and genuine. "Yeah, it was. No promises, no pressure. Just two people, standing on even ground, starting something real." Later that night, Sheila was curled up on the couch, flipping through college prep forms Mia had dumped on her, when her phone buzzed, a text from Calvin. "Had a great time today. Maybe next time we do dinner? Just as friends." Sheila stared at the screen for a moment, smiling despite herself. He wasn't pushing. He wasn't assuming. He was offering. She typed back, "Sure, as friends." She set the phone down, feeling oddly light. Maybe friendships weren't always just stepping stones. Maybe sometimes they were foundations. 2 months later, the company's annual gala was fast approaching, a formal, glittering event that half the office dreaded and the other half treated like the Oscars. Sheila was reviewing project budgets at her desk late one evening when Calvin stopped by, hands tucked casually in his pockets. "Got a minute?" he asked. She nodded, setting down her pen. He hesitated for a second, just long enough that she looked up and raised an eyebrow. "What's up?" He smiled, nervous but sure. "I was wondering, would you come to the gala with me?" Sheila's eyebrows lifted slightly. She opened her mouth, ready with a polite deflection, ready to remind him they were keeping it simple, but he cut her off before she could speak. "As my date," Calvin said. "Simple. Direct. No games." Sheila leaned back in her chair, studying him. He wasn't fidgeting, he wasn't flashing that old Beckmann charm. He was standing there, steady, patient, offering her the choice. Not assuming, not demanding, offering. "And if I say no?" she asked, just to test him. Calvin smiled lightly. "Then I'll still see you at the gala. I'll just be the idiot at the bar, pretending I'm having fun without you." Sheila barked out a small laugh before she could stop herself. She shook her head slowly, biting back a bigger smile. "All right," she said finally. "I'll go with you." Calvin's smile widened, but he didn't say anything cocky, didn't push his luck. Just nodded once, like he knew this meant something. Because it did. For both of them. The night of the gala, the ballroom was pure luxury. High ceilings, gold trim, glittering chandeliers throwing light across sharp tuxedos and shimmering gowns. It was the kind of setting Calvin Beckmann used to own without trying. But tonight felt different. Because Calvin wasn't working the room, he was waiting. He stood near the entrance, adjusting the cuff of his suit jacket, scanning the crowd, not for attention, not for admiration, just for one person. And when Sheila Carmen stepped through the doors, everything else seemed to fall away. She was breathtaking, but not in a manufactured magazine cover way. Simple black dress, hair pinned up, no flashy jewelry, just confident, self-possessed, stunning. Sheila caught his gaze and walked toward him, calm and sure, like she belonged there, because she did. Calvin smiled, soft and real, and stepped forward to meet her. "You look." He stopped himself from saying something cliché. Instead, he just said, "Perfect." Sheila gave a rare, real smile, small but genuine. "You clean up all right yourself, Beckmann." He offered his arm without a word. And, to her own surprise, Sheila took it. Inside the ballroom, the crowd buzzed with energy. Executives networking, partners showing off, board members sizing everyone up. But Calvin didn't work the room. He stayed by Sheila's side, introduced her properly, not just as his date, but as the director of IT infrastructure, the architect behind the company's most successful systems overhaul, the driving force behind the internship program they were all now proudly boasting about to investors. Every time someone tried to turn the conversation toward Calvin's last name, he redirected it, subtly, skillfully, back to the work, back to the team, back to her. Sheila noticed the shift. Everyone else noticed too. He wasn't a boy chasing praise anymore. He was a man proud to stand beside someone extraordinary, not above her, not in front of her, beside her. At one point, while she was deep in conversation with a VP about expansion possibilities for the STEM Foundation, Sheila felt Calvin's steady gaze across the room. Not possessive, not anxious, just proud. Later, when they stepped onto the terrace to catch some air, Sheila leaned against the railing, looking out over the city lights. "You're different," she said quietly, not looking at him. Calvin stood beside her, close but not crowding. "You're the first person who ever expected me to be." Sheila turned her head slightly, studying him. Not the Calvin she had met all those months ago, reckless and arrogant, but the Calvin who had fought, quietly, steadily, to become something more. "I'm glad you showed up," she said. Calvin smiled, not the old smug grin, but something warmer, deeper. "So am I," he said. They stood there in the cool night air, side by side, two people who had built something real, not out of games or grand gestures, but out of trust, respect, and hard, slow work. Not a perfect ending, just a real beginning, exactly the way it should be. The drive home was quiet, not awkward, just full. The kind of silence that didn't need to be filled with small talk. Calvin kept one hand lightly on the wheel, glancing over at Sheila now and then, catching her thoughtful expression out of the corner of his eye. When he pulled up in front of her apartment building, he shifted into park but didn't kill the engine. Neither of them moved right away. Finally, Sheila unbuckled her seatbelt and turned toward him, her hand resting lightly on the door handle, but she didn't open it yet. "I should probably say this," she said, voice steady, eyes locked on his, "before either of us gets ahead of ourselves." Calvin leaned back slightly, giving her all his attention. "I didn't trust you at first," Sheila said, straightforward as always. "I thought you were just another rich kid playing grown-up." Calvin smiled a little, no defense in his posture. "You weren't wrong. But," she continued, "I've come to respect you and trust you." She paused, letting the weight of that land. "And if you're still interested," she said carefully, "I'm willing to give this a real chance." Calvin's heart thudded once, hard against his ribs. He didn't rush. He didn't joke. He didn't ruin it with some slick line. He just leaned closer, slow enough that she could have pulled away if she wanted to. She didn't. He kissed her, soft, careful, nothing demanding about it, just the simple, sure promise of something real starting between them. When he pulled back, Sheila smiled, small, genuine, and so much more powerful than anything loud or dramatic. "I'm still interested," Calvin said quietly, almost against her lips. She nodded once, calm and steady. "Good." She opened the door, stepping out into the cool night. Before she closed it, she looked back at him, giving him one last look, Not daring him, not testing him, just seeing him. And for the first time, Calvin Beckmann knew exactly who he was. Someone worth standing beside her. Someone who had finally, truly grown up. And this, whatever it became, was just the beginning. At first, no one at Beckmann Industries believed it. Sure, people had seen Calvin Beckmann and Sheila Carmen talking more, exchanging quiet smiles, walking out of meetings together, but no one dared assume anything. Sheila wasn't the type to get caught up in office gossip, and Calvin wasn't the man he used to be either. Still, the rumors started. It wasn't until the company charity event, a casual afternoon fundraiser for the STEM Foundation, that the truth slipped into the open. Sheila arrived first, wearing simple jeans and a fitted blazer, clipboard in hand, managing the chaos like she always did. Calm, sharp, focused. Calvin showed up an hour later, not with a crowd, not making a scene, just him. And when he spotted Sheila across the courtyard, he didn't hesitate. He walked straight to her. Not in a rush, not trying to impress anyone, just a man walking toward the woman who had changed the entire course of his life. Norman, standing off to the side near the food table, caught the whole thing and shook his head with a small smirk. "I'll be damned," he muttered into his coffee. When Calvin reached Sheila, he didn't grab her hand, didn't pull her into some grand gesture. He just leaned in slightly and said something low, something that made Sheila smile, without even realizing it. The kind of smile she didn't give easily. The kind of smile she saved for people who earned it. They spent most of the afternoon working together, checking off logistics, answering questions, encouraging the interns who had shown up to help. And while they weren't overly affectionate, no hand-holding, no unnecessary touches, it was obvious to anyone paying attention. They were together. Strong, steady partners. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't gossip-worthy, it was real. And for Calvin Beckmann and Sheila Carmen, that was more valuable than any headline, any trophy, any quick, hollow victory. This was the long game, the good one, the one worth everything. Monday morning, Garrett's office. Sheila and Calvin sat side by side in the sleek leather chairs across from Garrett Beckmann's desk. The office, as always, felt more like a boardroom than a place for casual conversation. Garrett finished reviewing a folder, closed it, and looked up at both of them. "I wanted to speak to you two directly," he said, his tone firm but not cold. Sheila straightened slightly. Calvin looked calm but alert. Garrett folded his hands on the desk. The STEM program is now one of the most talked about initiatives in the regional tech network. Applications have tripled. 3 interns from the summer session are already being fast-tracked for full-time offers after college. He paused, letting that settle. "You both made that happen." Sheila gave a respectful nod. "Thank you, sir." Garrett shifted his gaze to his son, Calvin. Calvin met his father's eyes, steady and quiet. "I'm proud of you." Those 4 words hit harder than most speeches ever could. Calvin didn't reply right away. He just nodded, jaw tight, eyes briefly flicking toward Sheila before returning to Garrett. Garrett leaned back slightly. "Sheila, thank you for your patience, your leadership, and frankly, your willingness to deal with my son." Sheila allowed a small, wry smile. "He's grown on me," Calvin muttered. "Gee, thanks." Garrett allowed a rare grin, then cleared his throat. "Now, before this gets too sentimental, let me give you the practical part." He pulled a slip of paper from his folder and slid it across the desk. "HR policy update. Since you two are clearly something," he said, waving vaguely between them, "you'll need to fill out the disclosure form and speak to HR about your status. No drama, just process." Sheila raised an eyebrow. "You're okay with it?" Garrett shrugged. "I trust your judgment, both of you." He looked at Calvin again, pointed. "Just don't screw it up." "Not planning on it," Calvin said quietly. Garrett nodded once, sharp and final. "Good. Get out of my office. Go keep building something worth our name." As they left the office, the door closing behind them, Calvin glanced at Sheila. "So, we're official now?" She smirked. "As long as we survive HR paperwork." Calvin grinned. "Guess that means no making out by the servers anymore?" Sheila gave him a long, dry look. "You tried that once. You almost got electrocuted." "Still worth it," he said. She shook her head but smiled anyway, the kind of smile that made all the growth, all the time, all the work feel absolutely worth it. The end. Thank you for listening to Green Tea Tales. Help our channel to grow by like, share, and subscribe.